Greetings all, Paladin back with you. I want to get right into this one. 4 weeks ago, we released a video called The Color Purple. That was the day before Thanksgiving. On sometime that weekend, either Friday or Saturday, I had checked the views and it indicated 874. A couple hours later, I checked the views again and it indicated 829. So I don't know how we lost 45 views in the matter of 2 hours, but it seems like there were issues by the hosts that were perpetrated by the hosts. I had other people then starting to contact me saying that they couldn't watch the video, they didn't see it listed, certain apps weren't working. So it was kind of good news, bad news. The good news is that we were taking flack, so we knew we were over the target. The bad news is a lot of people weren't able to view the video. I don't know if they've been able to now or not. So anyway, we're going to do a redo, a redux, and we're going to point out some things that I didn't point out in the initial video to kind of give you some background and some history on how how this all came about. And I think we all remember our surprise, at least my surprise. I was surprised, most people were, I believe, when we found out that the IA, or the FIT investigation team, they call it, was doing the investigation in Mandalay Bay, primarily at 134 and 135 on the 32nd floor, because of the accidental discharge of SWAT Officer O'Donnell when they breached 134. Now, we had just had the biggest mass shooting in the history of the United States, and rather than have a homicide investigation, we had an IA investigation, essentially. So the FIT investigation team took precedence over a homicide investigation. And to even make matters worse, they held the crime scene. At least they tell us they held the crime scene until the East Coast FBI guys could get out there, and that was basically due to the shots at the fuel tank, which we still don't have any proof that anybody in 134 or 135 fired those shots, let alone Stephen Paddock. However, we were also surprised when the autopsy for Stephen Paddock came out, and we all checked the date, the time of death, and it was noon the next day. So we had 58 victims. The 31 who were either their locations for the 31 deceased outside the venue, inside the venue, at Tropicana and Hooters. Those were all 5:45 in the morning. The other 27 were deceased. They expired at the hospital, or at the hospitals. They have various hospitals around Las Vegas. The earliest time being 10:30, which if you listen to my autopsy video, I questioned that. But anyway, moving on. So we had the one person that we had their name earliest. I think Paddock's name was released earlier than any of the other victims, and that was done by Lombardo, I believe, at 3:30 with his date of birth, which I've never heard done before, but I have an idea why. And let's be reminded too that at 1:30 Lombardo indicated that they had engaged the suspect and he was currently dead. Okay, so Lombardo told the world he was dead at 1:30. But as we check the final report, what we find out is that everybody, the whole world, was notified that Paddock was dead at 1:30 in the morning, except the coroner. Okay, so here is the section in the final report about the coroner's investigator that was sent to the scene. Her name is Tiffany Brown, and in Tiffany's report, she indicates that at approximately 11:15 the next morning, LVMPD advised this office of a death located in room 132, 135 of Mandalay Bay Hotel, located at 3950 South Las Vegas Boulevard, Las Vegas, Nevada 89119. Okay, so it looks like to me the rest of the world knew, and the coroner was the last one to know that they had a dead body up in the 32nd floor. So we're going to move up here to the report of the investigation. This was also, I think, done by Tiffany. Maybe not. Maybe it was done by Funenberg. But anyway, what we have here, yeah, investigator Tiffany Brown. Okay, the call time and date 11:15. She was dispatched at 11:35. She arrived at 11:55. Okay, so that's 5 minutes before noon, and she pronounced the time of death at noon. Okay, so let's just cover that part, and most of this information here, the summary of the investigation, you can read it. I'm sure maybe some of you have. It's basically it's the narrative, what happened. It has nothing to do with the body on the floor. It has to do with what they allege the body or the person who was dead on the floor did. But here's the most important part. Okay, so the decedent, 64-year-old Caucasian male, was observed lying supine on the carpeted floor in his hotel room. Okay, now they go through and she describes what he was wearing. She determined that he was dead. She says indicates there was an apparent interoral wound noted. There was apparent blood-like substance noted about the face and head. Neck, chest, abdomen, back, and extremities appear to be unremarkable, even though it appears as if there's a wound to the chest wound. And basically, Newton in the body cam that was released a couple of weeks ago even admits that, referring to they shot him. Okay, there was blanching posterior livor mortis. Okay, we've already talked about that in the last video. Noted with which was consistent with the position of the body was observed in. Okay, so that what she's basically saying there is that the livor mortis was observed in a position consistent with where the body was located when she found it. In other words, it was on the bottom part of the body, which you would expect the livor mortis to be. Okay, there was the body was cool to the touch, and rigor mortis was noted. Okay, there were no signs of life present. I pronounced death at noon. All right. Okay, so before I go back to our information on death and the stages of death, I want to go up to this sheet. Okay, I've highlighted this. This is where they describe the decedent. I got his name up here, the location of the incident, which is the same. And then we have notification. And there was no notification made whatsoever. None. Okay, legal next of kin relationship. And this is when they call somebody in to identify the body. This is what this is. Name of person notified. So we had a brother in California, 4 hours away. We had a brother in Tucson, Arizona. We also had a brother and a mother back in Florida, yet they weren't involved. I guess they weren't notified. According to this, nobody was notified. And they identified Paddock on December 11th by fingerprints. Okay, so this is 2 months later, 2+ months later. I know by experience it doesn't take that long to get fingerprints back. Okay, and I will get into that when I do the Paddock autopsy. But I just wanted to note this, that according to this, nobody was notified. The Paddock family wasn't notified. And they identified not by somebody coming in and identify him, or not by his driver's license, as we heard on some of the body cams, or the Players Club cards that we heard, or by Joe Lombardo by giving his date of birth as 4953, or the numerous search warrants that were issued where they name Stephen Paddock. They talk about the incident. They talk about what he did. They found him. Well, McDonald said that they observed him put a gun to his head and pull the trigger. The rest of them said they found him dead. Now, the interesting part about this whole thing is that they don't in anywhere in this fit report say what shots killed Paddock. Okay, we're gonna go. I want to go to. Okay, all right. So we've got Paddock fired an undetermined. This is at 22:13. He fired an undetermined number of rounds in the Las Vegas Village area. Paddock fired 2 separate volleys of unknown number of rounds into the Las Vegas Village area. 22:16, Varson and Hendricks, along with Mandalay Bay security officers, made entry into the stairwell on the 31st floor. 22:17, 2 LVMPD officers reached the 32nd floor via the guest elevators. Neither officer heard any gunfire after they exited. The heat detection indicator inside 32-135 detected no further readings. Then we go to 22:41 and we start talking about the strike team. Okay. There's no mention here anywhere of when the body on the floor shot itself, because that's what they're selling us, right? That's the bill of goods they're selling us. Okay, so now I want to go to the natology, which is the forensic medicine and toxicology information. Okay, and I want to go down. Okay, so here's the changes. They're talking about the changes after death. Postmortem phenomenon or changes after death. Okay, here's the immediate changes. All right, here's the early changes. And you see eye, skin, muscular flaccidity, contact flattening. I'm going to talk about the last three: algor mortis, postmortem lividity, and rigor mortis. Okay, so we're going to go down to algor mortis, which is basically the temperature. All right, and I'm going to save you a lot of time. Algor mortis is one of the earliest signs of death. It indicates time elapsed since death. Okay, so the rate of cooling is affected by these factors. Okay, so the bottom line is the body loses temperature at a rate of 1.5 degrees Celsius per hour during the first 6 hours, followed by 0.9 to 1.2 degrees Celsius per hour in the next 6 hours when the body is clothed. Okay, so the bottom line is the surface of the body takes about 12 hours and internal organs take about 20 to 24 hours to reach temperature of the environment. Okay, now we're going to go to the postmortem lividity, and we have the same information that we talked about in the color purple. Postmortem lividity begins as a series of mottled patches on the independent parts of the body within 1 to 3 hours. These patches increase in size and coalesce in 3 to 6, and lividity is fully developed and fixed in about 6 to 8 hours. Okay, so the temperature drops. The surface of the body temperature is in 12 hours is the same as the environment. However, the internal organs, it takes them another 8 to 12 hours to reach environment temperature. Okay, lividity takes 6 to 8 hours to be fixed, and that doesn't change after it's fixed. And then if we go down to rigor mortis, where are you? Okay, rigor. And this goes through all the different explanations, the different explanations of rigor. This gives you the sequence of the appearance, which happens first. Number 7 is the important part here. In our country, rigor appears in 3 hours, is fully developed in 12, persists for another 12, and passes off in another 12. Okay, it's called the rule of 12. So 12, 12, 12, 36. So in 36 hours approximately, depending on some of these other factors, rigor mortis should not be present. Okay, so what you've got here is that the LVMPD waited 12 hours after they breached, almost exactly 12 hours. They called it 11:15. Okay, so in 12 hours you should expect to see rigor mortis, which you do. You should expect to see liver mortis, which you do. Okay, and you should expect to see the body temperature cold to the touch. Well, that's what Tiffany Brown says. But what would have happened if you'd have called them right away, like you should have, and the coroner's investigator would have come in at noon or at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning? Would they have found lividity fixed? Would they have found the same circumstances? The surface of the body was cool to the touch as she describes, and would they find rigor mortis? Well, we'll never know because they waited 12 hours to get her in there. But my contention is, given that we can see the lividity right here, plain as day on this crappy body cam video, the chin cam video from Bitsko, we can see lividity is in, it's fixed, okay? So this means it's at least, this body here has been dead at least 3 to 6 hours, probably 6 to 8 hours. So if they'd have called Tiffany Brown to come up there at midnight or right after this breach, she would have noticed this, she would have noted it, and there would be no way that they could say that this person, this body on the floor, if it is a real body, they could not contend that this body caused all the havoc, shot all the 1,050 rounds of ammunition of shell that they found the shell casings on the floor. This body, this person could not have been responsible for that because this person would have been deceased sometime between 3 o'clock and 8 o'clock. Okay? All right. Now, you know, I got to this party a little bit late. I watched the first. First 2 weeks of news conferences, and I could see Lombardo getting more and more agitated, more and more surly, more and more upset. And you could tell that he was the guy. He was put in a box by somebody, and we probably all know who that somebody is or somebody's are. And he was the guy that had to go out and pump the narrative. And the more he got questioned, the more unraveled he became. And we all know about the timeline changing. We all know, everybody knows about all the problems, okay? And so, you know, to me, it's like at this point in time, I have a checklist. I see these incidents happen, and on my checklist, I go through the checklist, and then I say, okay, it's BS, right? I mean, you have a lone gunman. That person is dead. Either they kill themselves or somebody killed. I mean, you know, so they don't have a criminal trial. That always saves them a criminal trial because if they had a criminal trial, they'd have to bring in all the evidence and prove that this person did it. And I still contend, I don't care what anybody says, I still contend that if I was Paddock's lawyer, I could get him off if he was still alive, and he might be. I could get him off. I could get him acquitted on this murder charge because there's no ballistics, and that's where I would start. And if you don't have ballistics, you can't tie the you can't tie it to the guns in the room, and then you can't even tie it to him shooting the guns because there's no evidence, or at least they haven't given us any evidence that he's got any gunshot residue uh, on his body, on his skin, on his clothes, anywhere. Okay, all right, so you know, this is supposed to be a community, and I'm late to the party because I didn't get involved until I heard about the issues with the autopsies, where they were fighting the release of the autopsies, and then they finally released them and they redacted them, and that's when I got involved. So I'm late to the party, 3 months, 4 months late. Sorry. And you know, I've been around since then, since March, did the couple interviews with Jason Goodman, and you know, so I became a part of the Las Vegas community. And it appears, at least from what I've gathered, that everybody, uh, you know, in a community, you work together. Everybody, you know, has a certain function. Some people look at certain things, other people look at other things. So you take all that information that you gather, all that data that you put together, and you're stronger because there's more of you. So here's what I want to here's what I want to say to this. Um, we've proved that Paddock, or the body on the floor, I should say, had fixed livor mortis at 11:20 or 11:30, I believe it is 11:34, according to the body cam. So what I'm going to say is to everybody out there who's creating, either debunk that or factor it in to your videos. You know, I've seen videos made since then, and they don't seem to be taking this into consideration. Well, Paddock did this, and Paddock shot from here, and how could he do this, and how could he do that? And Paddock did this with the guns, and he shot, and then he put these guns here, and he put these guns there, and it just doesn't make sense. Well, you know what? Debunk this or factor it in. Otherwise, you're not part of the community. Okay? Well, anyway, I really find this interesting that, this is a difficult concept to accept. I understand that, but this is reality. This is what we're looking at. And there was a video I did 2 or 3 videos back that I said, if you try to fit all of this into all of the stuff that you see in the body cam footage, you read in the witness statements, you hear on the 911 calls and the dispatch calls, and you read the dispatch logs, it's not going to fit the narrative. Okay. And I said, you got to expand yourself out. Okay. Well, this is going to stretch you a little bit. And maybe it makes your head explode. I'm sorry, but this is reality. You see it right here in black and white. Okay. You see it. There it is. Fixed lividity. Liver mortis right here. It's fixed. And see, this is the only part of Paddock's body that is exposed. The rest of it is clothed. The pants, the shirt, the gloves. Okay, so this is the only part that we can see, and there is lividity right there. Okay, so this is 3 to 6. This body has been there 3 to 6 hours, and most likely 6 to 8 hours. This lividity is there, and it is fixed. So when you have that problem with the timing, what do? Well, you wait 12 hours before you contact the coroner, and then you have the coroner come up, and at that point, it's been 12 hours since you breached. You've got 12 hours for rigor mortis to develop. You've got 12 hours for liver mortis to develop, and you've got 12 hours for the body to cool. So therefore, the time of death gets all screwed up. It gets distorted because you didn't get there in time. Okay. Now, what she could have done was take the internal temperature of Paddock, and that possibly could have given us an idea. And the reason they do the algor mortis and the rigor mortis and the lividity, the reason for this is because if you find a body, let's say at 3 o'clock in the morning, you get the coroner there. The coroner determines by the liver mortis, the rigor mortis, and the algor mortis, which is the temperature of the body. He can determine, or she can determine, that the body has been deceased for 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours. They can determine that. The sooner they get there after the event, the better they can determine the time of death. Okay, and it's important. Think about it. It's important. So let's say they find a body at 3 a.m. in the morning, and they determine that the person expired between 11 o'clock and midnight that night. Okay. Well, so the homicide investigators they start investigating, they start interviewing witnesses. Well, what's the first thing they're going to ask the witnesses? Where were you between 11 o'clock and midnight last night? That's the first question. And the reason is because that's when they know the time of death was. Okay, but in this case, it didn't seem to be important. The coroner was the last people to be notified that they had a dead body up there in 135. Okay, all right, enough of this. I beat a dead horse, but I want to reinforce this. Here it is, right here. I mean, like I say, the crappy body cam, you can see it. It's plain as day. All right. I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, a Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays, whatever it is. Happy to everybody. Be safe, be careful. We do have another video coming out probably tomorrow or the next day. It's going to be, or maybe even later on today. I doubt it, but maybe. And we're not going to have any kind of narration. We want you to be open-minded. I want you to look up the lyrics of the song. If you don't already know the lyrics of the song, look up the lyrics of the song that we're going to play. It's not the be-all, end-all of this, but it's going to be an illustrative collage of some of the nonsense surrounding this whole event. Okay? Now, I am considering doing a live stream this Friday at 10 o'clock Eastern, but I'm not sure. I'm not real technical, so I don't know if I can pull this off. I tested it yesterday. I think I can do it. I'm not sure that I can put things on the screen, but maybe we can have a Q&A and just kind of discuss some things. So if anybody's interested, you think that's a good idea, just put your comments, put it in the comments section, and we'll take a look at it and consider it. Paladin out.